Good morning. We got some announcements this morning. Several of you have asked if you could go get groceries or run errands or check on some of the shut-ins. So if you need help or you would like to help, please email the church and we'll get people together in that way. Also, we have an ongoing ministry with the Good Samaritan Soup Kitchen, and so we're collecting materials for them that they desperately need. There's a description in the description. There's a link that'll take you to our webpage. It'll tell you what they need and the schedule of operations. Also, Fletcher Horn, son of Dr. and Mrs. Danita Horn, has started a GoFundMe page to help support, feed hospital staff, such as custodians, orderlies, everybody who's stuck here, working really hard and putting severe stress on their families and things. So there'll be a link to that GoFundMe page as well. Okay, so for today's lesson, we're going to look at the reading from Paul's second letter to the church in Corinth. Just to catch everybody up, Corinth was noted for its difficulties and problems, infighting, elitism, sort of cults within the church, and all kind of problems. It had every problem known to man as far as dysfunctional church families go. Paul's first letter was filled trying to right wrongs and somewhat to defend himself. We talked about that a little bit. And so we're at the very beginning of 2 Corinth, the second letter to the church in Corinth. And Paul shares an experience with them to try to show solidarity, his suffering with their suffering, so he can connect with them in the second letter. And Paul shares the story of 2 Corinthians records the difficulties he had in Asia. And that's Ephesus. He was in Ephesus, and it's recorded in the 19th chapter of the book of Acts. So Paul is preaching in Ephesus, which has a temple of Artemis or Diana, and one of the ancient wonders of the world there. And there's a silversmith named Demetrius there who sees Paul as a serious threat and sees the coming of Christianity and the conversion of people as killing his livelihood and killing the cultic practices of Artemis there in Ephesus. And so Demetrius launches a campaign against Paul, gets a riot going to where they're drug into either the square or it's kind of like a Colosseum type place, and they're surrounded and will certainly face death. There's no way out of this. But Paul says they got out of it. And Paul says they got out of it and they went through those difficulties, made it through all that, just so they would realize their dependency on God or God being in control and not them. So they would rely on God and not themselves. And so Paul's trying to communicate that, to rely on God and not ourselves. The only reason Paul got through any of the difficulties and all the difficulties, the beatings, floggings, all those things we've talked about before, imprisonments, shipwrecks, riots where they are wanting to kill him, is relying on God, not himself. And so there's really a lot for us to chew on, given our present state, with our normal lives and the things we're good at being disrupted, with us being quarantined and really hindered in a lot of ways, with a lot of people falling sick and all these kind of things. It's a good question to look at, those fears, anxieties, all those things going on with us, and just our lives in general. Do we rely on ourselves or on God? And then when we look through the difficulties we've come through, why don't we look back through them again and see where God is in those? See where God was in those. See where God is in your life now. With the hope that you'll come to see God's hand active, protecting, holding you up and moving you through those difficulties. the hope for today is that you'll see your present difficulties and come to rely on God more than on your own power and your own intellect, your own skills, your own will. Um, it's a humbling lesson all the time for me when I have to stop and think about that, because I've been trying my whole adult life to be more reliant on God, and I always find myself relying on myself. Um, it's a constant battle, but Paul is very clear. Uh, Paul was allowed to survive those things uh, just so he would know his reliance on God. God has allowed me to survive things, not to Paul's extent, and go through things, so I would know the power of God working in my life, and I would rely on God and not myself. So, like I said, it's a constant battle, but it's one worth fighting, and it's the only way really to be happy and not go insane, or not go mad, or whatever word you want to use. So, consider that for the day. When we're in the greatest difficulties, we can see our reliance on God, or we can see God's presence much more clearly. And when we look back on things that we don't know how we got through, we can see that as well. So say your prayers, pray for the medical staff, pray for those who are affected, pray for those whose well-beings have been compromised. Everybody hang in there and stick together. I'm praying that the church holds you all in our prayers, in her prayers. So may God's blessing, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be upon us now and always.